yeah, 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 yeah. You don't know my story. You don't even know my pain. No, I'm not complaining, but I just want to give God praise. You don't know my story. So you don't know. You don't even know my pain. So you don't even know my pain. No, I'm not complaining, but I just want to give God praise. Y'all, for keeping me through the trial, for through the hurt I know. Oh, it was worthwhile, for through it came my growth, for bringing me through life's valley, and yes, for holding my hand. For it was in the valley that I began to understand. My God is so able, He won't leave me alone. Through the valley situations, I can see how I've grown. Saying, you don't know my story. You don't know. You don't even know my pain. So you don't even know my pain. No, I'm not complaining, but I just want to give God praise. I just want to give God praise. Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I'm not complaining, but I just want to give God praise. Listen again, because I know for myself the hand of God I've seen. Oh, that's why I love that verse, Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. Even overcame the hurdles the enemy set for me. Saying, you don't know my story. You don't know. You don't even know my pain. You don't even know my pain. No, I'm not complaining, but I just want to give God praise. I just want to give God praise. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't even know my pain. So you don't even know my pain. No, I just want to give God praise. Y'all, there were times when I was lied on. There were times when I done some wrong. You don't know. You don't know. That's all I'm trying to tell you. There were times when I done put Him first. There were times when I used to curse. You don't know. You don't know. He brought me from a mighty long way. You don't know my story. I'm here to tell y'all what He's done for me. Said He set me free. Saved my soul from a burning hell. Gave me a story to run and tell. You don't know my pain. No, I'm not complaining. Yeah. I just want to give God praise. You don't know my story. Yeah, Lord. You don't even know my pain. You don't even know my pain. No, I'm not complaining, but you don't know how many times I cried, how many times I fell, but I tried. You don't know. No, I'm not complaining, but I just got to tell somebody my story. You don't know my story. Sing it. You don't even know my pain. No, I'm not complaining, but I just want to give God praise. Thank you, Jesus, for keeping me. Thank you, Jesus, for holding me. Thank you, Lord, for keeping my mind. Thank you, Lord, you do it all the time. You don't know my story. Somebody ought to tell somebody. You ought to tell your story. Don't be afraid to tell it. You need to tell somebody that God is good. He brought you from a mighty long way. You need to tell somebody your story, y'all. I gotta leave this thing alone. I said you don't know, said you don't know. I said you don't know, said you don't know. Said you don't know, said you don't know. You can't tell it, let me tell it. What He's done for me. He picked me up when I was down. He planted my feet on my story on a solid ground, y'all. I gotta say, oh, no, 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 no. Give God praise. You don't know my story. Oh,
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Nobody Asked Me Guys show. Guys, listen, we have a historical event for you today. Actually, one that I don't think has ever been done. When you have persons like Mrs. ELAINE EASON-STEELE and Mrs. ANITA Peak, who are daughters of Captain Frank Clifford Eason, who's an airman. We have also with us Mr. Kenneth Spann. Okay, now all of these are historians, guys. You're going to be very happy about this. And we also have a surprise for the sisters who are great friends with a historian herself in her own right, with Mrs. Ella HAYGAN McCall. And she's going to be sharing with us as well. And the gentleman that I shared with earlier, Elder Sam McKinsey and Brother Billy Graham, I was talking with these gentlemen and I shared with them that it would be great if I could at least introduce them to these two magnificent young ladies. So on behalf just of, and I'm going to be personal with this, I'm going to take a personal privilege on behalf of a person that strongly admire and have the utmost respect for all of the work that has been done with Mrs. Parks, with Mrs. Eason and Mr. Spann, Mr. Kenneth Spann, and with Mrs. Peak, etc. I'm the one that's honored to be here. So we want to just make it very, very clear that this is a historical moment. And we just need for all of us and our children to understand that. So without further ado, what I will do is I will ask Brother Graham and Brother McKinsey if you'll kind of introduce yourselves to our historical group here and kind of share with them what you do and what inspired you to become pilots and that kind of thing, gentlemen. And we know it's usually age before beauty. So since everybody's beautiful, well, Ella McKinsey, if you don't mind, that says we will start with Brother Graham, since he's the senior of the group.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Brother Graham.
Good afternoon to all of this wonderful group. My name is Billy Graham, and I am honored to be a part of it on this occasion. I did a podcast with Mr. Laws or Minister Laws several years ago. And of course, back in the early 60s, I decided to attend flight school at Fort Rucker, Alabama. Well, I was given the opportunity to attend flight school at Fort Rucker, Alabama. And of course, everything was segregated at that point. And Governor Wallace was still standing in the doors of the white universities, stating that blacks would not be able to attend. Well, I just happened to be at Fort Rucker when this was going on. So it was much of the same segregation going at that time. I didn't have an opportunity to, and I was the only black in the class, so I didn't have an opportunity to go to the beaches in Panama City with my fellow classmates. But what I did, I stayed at home and studied because God, what God has for you is for you. And here I was given this wonderful, splendid opportunity, standing on the shoulders of those Tuskegee Airmen who went before me at Tuskegee, Alabama. So I felt that God had smiled upon me, and I took advantage of this opportunity to go out and fulfill my boyhood dreams of flying.
All right, I'm presiding elder Sam McKinsey, a presiding elder in the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. I spent 20 years in the Air Force. I was a B-52 bomber pilot. So I flew out of Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, have one flying deployment combat deployment and 3 combat deployments on the ground. And like Brother Graham, I was inspired by those that came before me. And there's Miss Eason and Miss Steele, thank you for making the time to do this. This is truly an honor because it was men like your fathers that inspired me to climb into that airplane and go through all the things that we did to become one of the few Black pilots, as you heard in Brother Graham's story, to have the chance to fly. And that I had that chance because of what your fathers did for us.
And Elder McKinsey, may I say one thing? It's Miss EASON-STEELE and Miss ANITA Peak. They are the sisters. So I did make that clear.
Okay.
So let me correct that now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, listen. You are in for a treat. We are going to be talking again to Mrs. ANITA Peak, and she is sharing a unique perspective as exactly how our Tuskegee Airmen became Tuskegee Airmen. She's going to share with you about her father, Mr. Frank Clifford Eastern, and the pursuit of her mother. Relax yourself, kick your feet up, and hear this outstanding story. Mrs. Peak, how are you this afternoon?
Good. How are you?
Well, listen, I cannot complain. I would even waste your time complaining. I'm just so excited and hyped up about speaking with you today and having had the opportunity to speak with you and Mrs. Steele and Miss Ella, and also Mr. Spann. And now you're going to share with us exactly how this whole process got started. And your mother, quite frankly, was really the mind thrust behind this, because as you've already shared, your father, like far too many men sometimes, we just in our man space, and we don't speak about things because we feel that it's trivial, but in reality, it far exceeds trivia. So will you share with us, please, what exactly transpired during the time of the Tuskegee Airmen actually obtaining their name and those individuals that were a part of this process?
Say that back in the day, in the 40s, when 30s and the 40s, when our father really got into the military, everything was race-based. It was not based on your abilities, but they put extra work if you were Black. So when our father joined the Army, he wanted to go to the Air Force. He wanted to be in the Army Air Force. At that time, they didn't have a separate Air Force. And they told him he couldn't unless he took a test. And my understanding is still have to take a test today. But at that time, he had to take a test. He did very, very well on it. And so they sent him to Tuskegee. But they sent him as a mechanic. There was no way that a Black man at that time could become a pilot. And so they sent him, and they were to repair. It was, at that time, Tuskegee was really the junkyard for its planes that no longer could fly. And the Black men were to repair them if possible. And so he was one of many. And after they did such a good job of getting them repaired, then they decided, well, let's see if they'll fly. And they did. And they finally flew overseas. My father flew to France and Africa, and well, all over Europe and northern Africa was where they flew, and but they were not given any credit, and they were still considered mechanics until the 70s. Was when my mother with the few airmen that were left, but my father not being one, I think they had a group of 8, 10 still left in Detroit, and but my father didn't participate. My mother did, who of course was not ever in the military, and in 1990, he had finally agreed to go to a program, but he was killed in an accident, and so my mother, as always, she went, and that was when they decided that they would try to get to the Capitol, and that they should get the Medal of Freedom. And my mother had been writing and talking to the Congress people about this for at least 20 years. And finally, they invited the few that were left, Tuskegee Airmen. At that time, they were still Tuskegee military. They weren't airmen yet, and that was when they finally began calling them who they really were the Tuskegee Airmen, because they had flown, like I say, through Europe and Africa during World War II. And now there were a number who had flown in the Vietnam War, and they were not being given the credit. And so they finally, got to the Capitol, and they were given the Medal of Freedom. And our mother received a medal for our father, Captain Frank Clifford EASON, and that was something else that she worked on, because in the early days, black men could only go up to sergeant. They couldn't even be a lieutenant or a captain. But she kept working at it, and others were working too. And to see that they got their correct and distinguished careers noted in the history books, just like the white officers. And a lot of times the officers got the credit that the black officers actually had done the job, and but because of race, the white officer got the credit, not the black officer. So they were able to move up. It was near 2000 before any black man could be a general. And they didn't allow us to go through. We had to do 10 times as much as anybody else in order to get the recognition that we deserve. And today, young people just take it for granted, but they don't realize how difficult it was back in the day. They didn't get paid like the white military, nothing. They got no treatment like the white military, and but they worked very, very hard and did an excellent job to protect this country. And I'm very glad that we're getting a chance to really hear the story. And as I said, our mother was one of the prime people that made sure that the story finally got told. And our father, he had passed, but he got she in his honor, she got the Medal of Freedom.
Fantastic. Now, you were, if I understand correctly, your mother was a Spelman grad. Is that correct?
Absolutely,
And
she was a Spelman grad.
And we want to be sure to share with our audience her name as well.
Oh. Her name was BERTHA Louise WALLACE-EASON, and because of race, when she went to Presbyterian school, starting at the age of 3, because Black children couldn't go to the public schools in the South. That we were not allowed to go to the public school. And so, but Presbyterian Church did do teaching, and she went from the age of 3 up through the 12th grade. She went to Presbyterian school. And Mary McLeod Bethune was one of her classmates. I could give a whole list of famous names because it didn't matter who you were, it mattered your race. And she was very smart. She became a teacher, and but even in Detroit, Wayne State, they would not let her in because of her race. And she graduated from Spelman, and after she graduated and came back and came to Detroit, she was in she's from Augusta, Georgia. That's where she was born. When she came to Detroit in the early 50s, she couldn't go to college here. She wanted to get her master's, and they thought that was a joke for a Black woman to want to get a master's. And in fact, she went to med school for a minute, and but all of these things changed because when our father came to Detroit, which was his home, they found that there were even more restrictions on her education in Detroit than they were in the South. And but she went on. She finally got her master's when she was in her 40s, and but she was always educated. She was always teaching.
Fantastic. So, as you're educating us, Mrs. Peak, we are supposed to believe in 2024 that there is no such thing as systemic racism. We are supposed to just ignore the fact that it was not until 2000 that Black men could become generals in the military. We're supposed to just ignore the fact that when people talk about MAGA, or Make America Great Again, is that is not anti-African American and other people of quote color unquote. We're just supposed to sit back from all the history that you're sharing with us and receive and believe that DEI is supposed to be somehow offensive when people ask and fight for the right to have diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you've just given us a very beautiful lesson just on things with Mrs. Rosa Parks, with your mom, with your dad, and the work that you still do as we move forward when we talk about the Rosa and Raymond Park Institute for Self-Development, which you direct and keep moving. So as you or have shared all of this rich history with us, is there anything else you would like to share further as it references what we are discussing?
Well, I agree with everything that you said and that you always say about the history repeating itself.
Yeah.
And today, unfortunately, we still don't know what we need to know about our people, about our family history. And it's not really being taught in school. And our children are not learning the way they need to learn. That was something that was very important to our mother, to Mrs. Park, to instill education, learning to read and write and do your math. And these are still issues today for our children, that the comprehension is not there. Even though they may read words, understanding is not there. So our Pathways to Freedom program, which is part of Rosa and Raymond Parks Institute, that's what we do. We work with young people to make sure that they are educated and understand and comprehend their work.
And I am happy to say that I was blessed to have not only learned about, Pathways to Freedom, I had the opportunity to be a part of the process. And it is an excellent, outstanding program. And I'd like to encourage all of us, not just people of color, to take advantage of that, because we all need to know history as it is. And dare I say, like many other individuals, is that we all need to know American history. People try to, as a matter of fact, I read a quote someplace, I can't take credit for it, and when it says Black history is, quote, white people history, unquote, but American history is actually Black people's history, which what people do not want to talk about. And last thing I'll say, I'm going to speak about that as well, is that we have been brainwashed to ignore the fact, and I think it was said best by one of the late poets, is that when we were growing up as children and we'd watch Westerns and we'd watch cowboys and Indians, we didn't realize that we were the Indians. And we were pulling for the cowboys who were invading another land, who was murdering and killing. And you didn't see us. They were robbing banks. They were hijacking stagecoaches and everything else. Who were the real criminals and who remain the real criminals today? But they've done the bait and switch and tried to make it seem as though we are the criminals and we are the scourge of the earth, when quite frankly, their own history, which they wrote and which they put on film, shows who they are. Even with these so-called land barons, it would bring in gunslingers to murder other people, cut off water, take people's land, things of that nature. So everything that you're sharing is just so full of much needed information. And that's why I repeat again, the Pathways to Freedom program is an outstanding one that needs to be continued across this nation. So it has been great, great, great having you share all of the information that you shared with us. My hat is off to you, to Mrs. Steele, to all of the individuals. I know that some of them have gone on to be with the Lord at this point, but those that are still with you, like Mr. Spann and like Ms. Ella HAYGAN and so many others, my hat is off to you and the entire process, because what you do, the legacy your parents have left, and obviously the legacy Mrs. Marks has left, is the legacy for the ages.
And I thank you, but I have to make a correction.
Please.
The first boys came from Africa.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Black. And they were not pillaging and shooting. That became a movie kind of thing. But they were black, and the reason they were called cowboys was because they took care of the cows, the bull, the land, and the animals on the land.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to understand that a lot of the positive things that we have here in this country today came from Africa.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So much for spending your Saturday with me, and I appreciate it very much.
Well, listen, the pleasure is certainly all mine. Now, gentlemen, before we ask Mrs. Steele to share, I just want to let you brothers know, as you guys know, we all know each other personally, just like I know them. But I would like you to think about this. What are the odds? You have daughters of the Tuskegee Airmen. You have Mrs. Steele, who happens to be, and she'll tell you her story, how she met Mrs. Parks. I mean, what are the odds that you have these great historians happen to, as the kids say, hook up together, and the rest is history?
All right.
My.
Yeah.
So, Mrs. Steele, I'm shutting up. I'm listening. We're listening for you.
We lived in the same neighborhood, and that was very helpful. Right across the street from each other. So, and we were friends, and she was until her mother passed away. She also was a friend to us, and we just had a very joyous time.
Wow. Yeah. Now, Mrs. Steele and Mrs. Park and Mr. Raymond Park co-founded an organization. And Mrs. P, can you tell us a little bit about that organization and how it works?
The Rosa and Raymond Park Institute for Self-Development.
Yes, ma'am.
The title was founded by Mr. Park and Mrs. Park. And Mr. Park was forced to leave Alabama if he wanted any kind of treatment as a human being, because at that time in Alabama, black men were not considered human beings. And his brother lived here and had him to come to Detroit, and they both came. And that's how we got to meet them.
Okay. Now, before we move further and talk about the book By Her Side, which Mrs. Peak, excuse me, I'm sorry, which Mrs. Steele talks about her engagement over 40 plus years. She also have a friend here with her in the person of Miss Ella, who also worked with Mrs. Parks and Mrs. Peak and Mrs. Steele throughout on this road. And we'll talk about the book a little bit. I know we have, if I can call him Brother Kenneth, I know we have Brother Kenneth there. Would you like to share with us a little bit as we prepare to hear from Miss Ella, and then we will talk about the book By Her Side?
Well, actually, I started working with the Rosa and Raymond Park Center in 1990 with my uncle, who was Donald Corley, who was deceased, bless his soul. And I was struck by the family atmosphere of the institute. I started working with my uncle and actually met Mrs. Parks for the first time. And it was like talking to my grandmother. Exactly like talking to my grandmother. And so I was endeared to that. And that started my voyage with this great institute and these great ladies.
Thank you.
I have been in this position quite a while, so I've held quite a few positions. We have ourselves in, but we are making progress. This is a book By Her Side, representing Mrs. Steele and Mrs. Park's journey. It is needed for people to understand that relationship. I don't think many people understand what it is for actual friends, to incorporate themselves into an institution that is dedicated to education, educated children, educating mothers, and helping the least of us to gain some footing in this world. And so I am honored and have been for a long time to work alongside Ms. Peak and Ms. Steele and Ms. Hagan. And I hope that today we will be able to get some information out, that people know that we don't stand still. We continue to fight.
Right. Amen.
Absolutely. We definitely will get some more information out about By Her Side. And actually, thank you for that, because we'll talk again. I keep saying I don't want to keep you guys too long, but there's just so much rich information here, which is a perfect segue into hearing from Miss Ella. I mean, as you guys know better than me, because you've known Miss Ella longer than I have, and she's a rich library walking around, not only working with the three of you and along with Mrs. Parks, but also having had the privilege to live in the same neighborhood with Mr. Carter G. Woodson and to know him. And I think, Miss Ella, you recently did a piece with the Washington Post or something like that, I think last year.
It was the New York Times. It was the New York Times.
New York Times, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Will you share with us a quick double duty as far as your association and affiliation?
Okay.
Okay.
Let me start with Dr. Woodson, because I knew him. We lived across the street from him. It was back in the day when everything was segregated, DC, and they had us in certain neighborhoods. So Dr. Woodson was there when we got there, when we moved over there. and we didn't realize who he was, or, you know, we didn't realize the importance of who he was. But he had like a townhouse, and he had his business, and he lived on the third floor and everything. But people came, like Mary McLeod Bethune and the poet, I can't think of his name right now, from New York. They work for him.
Are you talking about Langston Hughes?
Langston Hughes, yes.
Okay.
And but we were little. I didn't, recognize them people until I got older. I was about 6 or 7 when I actually, knowing this. We called him Mr. Woodson, because we didn't understand about the doctor part, until we got to school and we learned about Black History Week. And the teacher said, this is Dr. Woodson, blah, blah, blah. And we said, no, that's not Dr. Woodson. He ain't no doctor. That's Mr. Woodson. He lived across the street from us, So we were kids. But that's how I realized how important he was. And so when I was 14 years old, he passed away. All right, let me move on to, I got an opportunity in 1990. I was a hostess for a birthday party for Mrs. Rosa Parks. It was her 77th birthday. And my good friend, Dr. C. Dolores Tucker, who I volunteered for and worked in her office and everything, and I met Miss Parks through her, and through Mrs. Kathy Hughes. I met Miss Parks and Miss Steele. Now, they asked me, we said, we want you to take care of these ladies while they're here. This is for a weekend, I said, first I said, no, y'all. No, I was just afraid to be, I didn't want to do anything wrong, in front of them, So I said, but then they said, well, you're going to go and do it anyway. So I did. And that one weekend turned into 35 years that I've been with the Institute. And 15 of them was with Miss Parks and Miss Steele, traveling with them. They come into D.C. I end up being the point person, and then they asked us to be, they wanted a chapter here. So they set up we asked us to be a part of the chapter. And so some of them was with us when we first started, but they had their own organization, so they went on. But I continue to stay, and I'm here trying to do what I can. I work with the kids. We got an exhibit of her and quilts. We just got an art exhibit I think is out of sight. And these ladies, I just can't get over how they trusted me. And how they make me feel. Sometimes I said, how in the world how did I get here? I'm not supposed to be here, but I am, and I thank them for loving me and trusting me and just treating me like a sister. And so, I'm emotional, you all, so forgive me.
Well, that's okay. Now, you have been beautiful with those explanations, but we also know that you have an organization, several that you head and you work with. Can you share that with us briefly? And then we're going to.
Yeah, I have an organization.
Have any questions, feel free to ask.
I have an organization called From Streets to Skills, Social Services Incorporated. I am a social worker, and I worked with the homeless for years. I used to run one of the largest social shelters in DC with mothers and children. So that's a whole story. That's the whole news articles everywhere on. You can go and look up Ella McCall and you'll see. But I started the organization because when the people left the shelter, they didn't have anything, So we were able to do beds for them. We were able to do clothing. And later on, I was able to do, but the organization, we were able to work with Habitat for Humanity and get them housing. And so, I still give out food, like Thanksgiving turkeys and all stuff, all of you, and I give out quotes. I have a quote drive. I give out quotes, and I still do that. We exhibit, and we were able to featuring Mrs. Parks and pictures of Miss Steele. Just pictures of everybody, and so that's me. That's what I do. And
listen, we certainly appreciate that. I'd like to ask Brother Graham or Elder McKinsey if they have any questions or anything they'd like to share relative to what we've discussed, or some things that they may just want to add.
Yes. First, this is incredible, right? That we're able to gather here and the connections that have been made in history, right? For me. So first, we talk about the Tuskegee Airmen. Had my first exposure to the Tuskegee Airmen when HBO put out a movie. I think it might have been 1994, right? That was the first time I ever heard of the Tuskegee Airmen. And, to us, that was a big deal, and it was a hit. And then I went to the Air Force Academy, and I got to meet some of them in person, right? So these men became my heroes. And I had never thought of flying aircraft, becoming a pilot until I was 20 years old, right? It was because of the effect that men like your father had on me, right? This is also incredible to me because about that same time, I read a book that had a tremendous impact on me. And the name of that book was The Miseducation of the Negro.
Woo!
Carter G. Woodson.
That's right.
And there's a connection with Dr. Carter G. Woodson and the Tuskegee Airmen in this conversation. So here's my question to you. You spoke about that you really didn't know who Dr. Carter G. Woodson was, although he lived on the street.
I didn't know how important he was.
How important. Did you know how important what your father did was, or when did you become aware of that? Because they changed.
Okay, I was raised.
Changed history.
The Woodson, to me, he was like a father to us on that block, because you had people, single mothers with children, and but they worked and everything. But and you had every different kinds of status, poor, people with Black-owned businesses, and people with middle class, all that, and all together. And we looked out for each other. And that was one of the things that like I say, he was like the father, grandfather, uncle on the block. And I remember we got burnt out. We lost the apartment. We came out. I mean, we almost didn't make it, and we had nowhere to go. Red Cross was not doing anything. I don't know if they was there. They was not doing anything for us, and we had nowhere to go, but the neighbors took us in, and they collected money for us because we had nothing in that block. And Dr. Woodson, he contributed. And I mean, it's just, like I said, I knew Miss Parks as personally, and I knew Dr. Woodson. So that, that's, I love that man. And when I dropped out of school and blah, blah, but I went back, I went to college. I thought about him the whole time. I went to college. I got my undergrad, and I got my master's degree in social work. And
okay,
I contributed that to him.
Well, as far as we were concerned, Father, he really didn't talk about being a Tuskegee Airman. We learned that through the history book, and our mother. Mother was the one who told us who he really was. He never really talked about it at all. He just took care of us and the neighborhood. And there were only 2 cars on our block, and his was he made the other car run, and he had a car, and that's how we took care of getting groceries and doing everything else. And but he was very quiet. He did not talk about his years. And we found out when we were grown, he was allowed to fly at the city airport. But we didn't realize that during the years, he was not allowed to even be called a pilot because of his race.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow.
So we were fortunate that we got a chance to fly with him at City Airport here in Detroit. But that was in fact, it was the year before he passed. He was killed in an accident, and but that was how we found out about him being a pilot, because he never talked about it. But he was called a mechanic. He was not called a pilot.
Wow.
And ELAINE-STEELE and Ms. Parks worked on making sure that the Tuskegee Airmen were called Tuskegee Airmen, because they did fly. They had to build the plane and then fly. They were given they worked in the Tuskegee was the junkyard for the planes that they didn't, the white pilots didn't use anymore. And they had to fix them and then fly them before they could allow any white pilot to touch them. They had to make sure that they were all right. And they flew overseas and everywhere else. They had to fly.
Wow.
They got no credit until the 70s. Most of them were dead by the time. I think it was 2 or 4 that were still living when they finally decided to give them credit.
Wow.
My comments were based on the fact that I did have an opportunity to fly with one Tuskegee Airman after he was retired from the military, and he came back as an instructor pilot at Fort Rucker. His name was Mr. Wright, which is a wonderful pilot. One of few African-American pilots at Fort Rucker during my stay at Rucker in the early 60s. My association with Milton Pitts Crenshaw, who was an operation officer with the Tuskegee Airmen, I went to help celebrate his 95th birthday in 2015, and they gave me a Aviation Service Award for my service in Vietnam. So I am so honored to be among you living legends on this call. I feel very honored to be able to listen to your voice and hear, you know, the experiences that you've had.
Yes, we are. Oh, God, so proud of you.
Well, you know, again, I say, you know, what God has for you is for you.
That's right.
And you know, I try to tell our younger generation that's coming up that, you know, don't let no one steal your joy. Don't let anyone tell you how far you can fly.
Amen.
Because, you know, it's God has willed that. I just happen to be a young man who had a dream of flying. But I claimed that dream, and I held on to that dream. And God allowed me to fulfill that dream. So I'm very appreciative to be on this call with you and to just express my sincere appreciation for you all having me to be a part of it.
Yes, indeed.
Well, thank you. We feel the
I
same.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Yeah.
To have you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen,
Mhm.
I will have to say, and I don't want Elder McKenzie to blush, but like I tell this brother all the time, from an old man's perspective, not that I don't appreciate all of us, I appreciate him because when we see young people like Brother McKenzie carrying the torch, then it means that our fight has not been in vain.
Has not been in vain,
Amen.
I tell you.
And so I just want to share
Amen.
that with this young brother, so that when he gets old like us,
Mhm.
he might want to replay this for his grandkids.
All right.
Yeah. Listen,
Mhm. Yes,
Brother
indeed.
Span, will you
Mhm.
assist the sisters, if you will, to tell us a little bit more about By Her Side? Now, I have the book, I've read the book, and I've shared it with Mrs. Steele. And I'll be very honest with everybody on this call. Usually when I read, I'm a very impatient person and I just kind of scan. But this book, I read every page. And it's a
Yes.
fantastic book.
It's a
Will you
great
speak
book.
just a little bit on that? And then I promise I'll get out of everybody's hair and let you guys go and get you some rest.
Well, for me, the book entailed the struggles and the personal endeavors of Mrs. Parker and Steele, the things that they had to go through in order to keep this institute alive and thriving, as well as highlighting their friendship. And that's basically what I got from reading the book.
Great.
Very insightful. But personally, for me, a lot of that I have already seen. Being here for quite a while, I have seen and experienced quite a bit of it. So it was acknowledgement for me that we are, how can I say this? We are surrounded by great women every day. And when a great woman or a great person of color, period, can get recognition for a life of service, it is a great thing to me.
Absolutely. Fantastic. And
let me say this, Miss Anita P. We need her book. Her book is next.
yes, I agree.
Isn't that funny? I said that
I
a few
agree.
weeks ago.
And also, I'm sorry. Also, I would be remiss if I did not mention my late wife, Gwen Marie Dudley Spann.
Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful lady.
Side by side with me here at this institute.
Yes, she did.
Okay.
She certainly did. She was a wonderful lady. And she's
she
the
was.
reason we have an institute. Is because she was determined that we have an organization, not just us doing things ourselves. And she's gone on to glory, but she'll always be a part of us. That's for sure.
She's a true visionary.
She was a true visionary. Yes, absolutely.
True visionary.
Yes.
And ladies and Brother Span, please help me to say to Miss Ella, she's not off the hook either when we talk about books. Please let her know she's not off the hook.
Miss P, can you please tell them a little bit about Miss Parks and sports, how she felt about sports? Because they honored her.
She loved all
Yeah.
of them. We went to, we even went to the hockey game. We went to baseball. Well, baseball was her number one. And because she was allowed as a child to go to the Negro League. So they had a Negro League then, but that was baseball. So that was number one. But she we took her to every game. It was baseball, football, basketball, hockey. We took her to everything. She loved sports.
Wow.
Yeah. And the reason why can I say something? The reason why I asked you to say this because
denied in the South when she was in Alabama. They couldn't even go to school. Black boys could not even go to school.
That's right.
Because of their race. So that was another reason that she was happy to come to Detroit and to do anything she could to promote Black boys and men.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, ladies, it's certainly been a pleasure. And I'd like
to
Can I say
one thing before we leave?
Of course.
There's a young man, I saw him wearing a Rosa Parks t-shirt. And this young man, he just won,
Jalen Hurts.
I think, the most valuable player award.
Jalen Hurts, quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yes, he was wearing Miss Parks t-shirt. So this young man must be from the old school. Yeah. Well, we plan on getting
because I met these wonderful women through Mrs. Steele's son-in-law, Mr. Mitch, and he and I were just having a simple conversation, and he was out beating the drums about the Rosa Raymond Parks Institute, etc. And Mitch Dennison, by the way, and he said, "Hey, man," he said, you'd be great to work with the organization, etc., etc. So I'll be honest with you, Mitch is very verbose, as such as myself. I thought he was just really kind of blowing smoke, to be honest. But he was very persistent. And so I would really do him a disservice by not sharing with him that it was because of him that I have the great opportunity to not only work with you beautiful ladies and to have an extended personal relationship, but it was because of his persistence. So Mitch, when you see this, I have to give you your props, my brother. You were very instrumental, yes, in this process. So I have to say that. Yes. Elder McKinsey, Brother Graham, any closing remarks before we ask the sisters and Sister Ella and Brother SPANN if they have any closing remarks? You gentlemen have any that you'd like to share?
I just want to thank you all for this honor of meeting you virtually and you sharing just a small part of your inspirational story with us.
Yeah, my sentiments exactly.
Okay.
Thank you so
much.
Ladies,
Ladies, any closing remarks you'd like? I'm sorry.
Well, we are always honored and privileged to have an opportunity to talk with us about us. And so we really appreciate this opportunity, and to meet more people, we're very, very happy. Hug yourselves for us. We appreciate it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Nobody Asked Me Guys show. And again, this is our version of up-to-date history. Like most of you, I'm sure that when people say Black history, we all have our ideas about it and what it entails. However, you have historians here. You have several generations here. And as you can see, the fight continues. And we make that very clear, is that when we talk about the fight, we're not all the time talking about marching down the street with flags, or we're not always talking about thinking we have to physically put our hands on someone. We're talking about the intellectual fight. So the intellectual fight continues, and it will continue to continue. So as you guys view this video, please feel free to reach out to Mrs. Peak and Mrs. Steele. Please feel free to go to the internet and look up the Rosa Raymond Parks Institute, and don't forget to donate to that cause. Please do not forget to purchase this book by her side. It is very inciting. I mean, it tells you a lot of things that you will never get from a history lesson in school. Mrs. Steele has stepped out and really laid out a lot of things. She tells the what she called the real. Now hear the real story.
Real story.
Yes, it's the real story. So listen, allow me to thank each and every one of you for coming on and for being here, because it certainly was a pleasure for me to be able to introduce such dynamic individuals to one another and to be a part of the process. Because one thing, and I think all of you that talk to me have heard me say, we do not do enough to promote our own. We do not have to rely on other people who promote us. So it has certainly been a pleasure. And I thank each and everyone for coming. And I wish everyone a great and blessed day.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. Have a great day.
Thank you, and you too.
Thank you.
All right. Amen.
You too also, sir.
Thank you.